Let's see what Charlie has to say.
Let's talk about what we're doing to white people. There's been something going on for a while now that we're being told not to notice. More to the point, that we're asking white people not only to ignore, but to accept the rising tide of racial hatred against white people.
Well, that's awesome. Rising tide. It's long before this young Charlie. Charlie looks like a young man. It's older, of course, than he is. But his perception of everything is going to be his lifetime. So keep that in mind.
In the past decade, there has been a noticeable cultural shift in what constitutes acceptable speech as it relates to white people. Back when I was a kid,
Well, here it goes. Let me just jump back.
of racial hatred against white people. In the past decade, there has been a noticeable cultural shift in what constitutes acceptable speech as it relates to white people. Back when I was a kid, in the early 2000s, the mainstream American culture preached about respecting each other's differences and not seeing color.
Let me just jump in. There hasn't been a shift since the 2000s. As far as in the 2000s, they didn't want you to see color. They didn't want you to see race. Remember, never trivialize race. Race is deeper than skin deep. But this "we don't see color" is a meme pathogen that's given to younger people. It's like a gateway drug. So you could still find this meme pathogen, but anti-whiteism works incrementally. So over time, it has a meme pathogen like this. This is an anti-white idea. An anti-white idea. Kate agrees with my previous statement about everything tasting better out of me. It delivers a meme pathogen, an anti-white idea concept, something that's corrosive to white people and to our projections, which can be this government, which law and order, etc., right? So once that takes root and enough people have accepted and adopted that, it doesn't instantly cease to exist. It continues. So that's why that meme pathogen, which was much more useful many decades ago, is still around and still being employed. This is human dynamism at work. So it's just important to understand that the change in conversation is not something that is sort of a recent thing, which could imply that it's going to be short-lived and there'll be these vicissitudes. When in reality, this is the pressure of anti-whiteism applied to us, to the country, to the West, consistently, that's getting worse and worse.
Nowadays, we say that not seeing color is racism, that you must see color. But the more I see how things are unfolding, the more I'm convinced that this is wrong. Back then, saying something offhanded about white people were seen as not appropriate, just as it would be to say something offhanded about people of any other race. But that soon gave way to our current times, in which there exists virtually no limit to what racial minorities can and do say about white people. I
Well,
believe
so that's very impressive and very courageous. Don't overlook the fact that Charlie is showing an extreme amount of courage to break with the anti-white cult. He is a non-white person. He could just reap the rewards of anti-whiteism for his whole life. He could just take the advantages that are given to him as a non-white person in Western civilization his whole life. And that could mean sexually, financially, your prestige with jobs, etc. He could just take advantage of all of that. And instead, he's saying, you know what, I'm going to speak out against this. I'm guessing because he sees it. And Charlie, if you're listening, if you'd ever like to come on the show with me and have a conversation about this, let's do it. Reach out to somebody who's obviously like here, and they could get in contact with me. But he's saying, I'm guessing that he's just noticing that this is, maybe not just noticing, but that this is immoral. To do this to white people is immoral. And he wants to speak out against it because he can see that it is immoral. He can see these double standards, these superficial double standards. But the courage that he has to exhibit here is based in his awareness of what his obvious awareness, because he's speaking and thinking. He would have to be like drooling and staring into space to not be able to understand that anti-whites crush you. They treat you like a white person if you speak out against anti-whiteism. So it takes a lot of courage for him to do this, and I salute him for that. He says volume, Archangel says the volume for Charlie is quite low. Wonder how I could remedy that, because he's turned all the way up. Maybe if I dial me back, you could turn us both up. Let's see. All right, how's my volume now? Am I a little bit quieter so you can turn me up, and then he'll be louder? Let me know. Let's roll though.
Believe this is the natural outgrowth of a perverse ideology that teaches us that every societal ill, is the fault of white people, and that what
Amen. Exactly. That's exactly what it teaches. That's exactly what everybody can tell. Everybody can see that he's saying what's obvious. And think about this, it's a revolutionary act for him to say what is obvious. And that is the power of anti-whiteism. The great No White Guilt Clips is here. Thank you. Says sounds good. Okay.
whatever prejudice acts we may inflict upon them does not constitute discrimination because we don't have the power to discriminate.
Okay, that is, I mean, I'm sorry, I got to stop. The power to discriminate. This is a meme pathogen the anti-whites use all the time. What they do is they anthropomorphize a race. And it works because the vast majority of people are at either midwits or uber midwits. And uber midwits, like 100 plus to 120 IQ, they still don't understand that you can't anthropomorphize and then ask proper questions to get to proper answers or conclusions. So they anthropomorphize an entire race of people. That's what they do with the white race here. They anthropomorphize them. Are there white people with power? Well, sure, I guess. How are we going to define power? And if there are white people with power, then anywhere you can make this anthropomorphic claim, anthropomorphizing the white race as a single entity, a single brain, a single person. If there's any white person that has power, then they are the only ones who can discriminate. They are the only ones who can be this anti-white term, of course, concept racist that we don't use. They do the same thing to non-white people at the same time there. This is another mental trick that they play on you. Hardcore. Anti-whiteism is hardcore psychological warfare. And going free is the psychological defense that defeats it. They anthropomorphize all non-white people. It's just one person. Are there any non-white people out there that are poor? Well, sure. And so therefore, how much power does that non-white person on a street corner have that lives in a cardboard box or in a van down by the river? Not much. So this is just a mental trick to get you to capitulate to an anti-white outcome, to the victimization of white people. You reject this MP on its face. You don't get into a debate about how many people who are white have power and how many white people are poor versus non-white people are poor. You're never going to win those. You're inside the anti-white narrative where fiction is reality and reality is ignored. So you got to be smart about this. You definitely don't start acting like a fixator and say, well, let me tell you the group that's really in charge. All right.
And alarmingly, this is particularly pronounced in the younger generation. But is it true? Do we not have the power to discriminate? Well, let's see. First, let's take a look at the racial hatred at the interpersonal level. In today's society, it has become somewhat fashionable to think things and say things about and to white people that would not be acceptable if it was said about any other race. And we're being taught that this double standard is not wrong. that it is rather a form of empowerment. They'll attribute negative experiences that they've had with white people to their whiteness. You had an argument in life.
Oh, we have to teach Charlie, do not use the term anti-white slur concept, whiteness. You could say attribute to their people, to their biology, attribute to whatever. Whiteness, please, Charlie, if you're listening, look up where that came from. It was created by anti-whites to attack white people.
At the grocery store with a white person, they were acting entitled because they were white. Empowerment. They'll attribute negative experiences that they've had with white people to their whiteness. You had an argument in line at the grocery store with a white person, they were acting entitled because they were white. A white driver cut you off when you were driving, they need to check their white privilege. Your actions, your conduct, and your existence, in other words, boil down to your whiteness. And
Okay, so again, this is a revolutionary act, even though it is a very simple observation of reality, because it contradicts the anti-white narrative. It's at odds with it. That means Charlie is going to be attacked as a white person. He'll get the same slurs. He'll get the same harangues. He'll get the same denunciations. But these are the conversations that stem from what? Do they stem from the actual lived experience? Do you live in a world, and all non-white people know this, they're being honest with themselves. White people know they're being honest with themselves. The world you live in, white people have no power. White people are afraid. White people don't ever work together. They're terrified of working together or even being seen working together. We're never thinking about each other. We're the most radically individualistic, in my opinion, group of people that has ever existed. We have no identity as the white race. That's what we're trying to create. That's lived experience. Every non-white person goes out into the world. They have white friends. They see that at school. They see that at work. They see that their groups, their non-white groups, stick together for the benefit of the individual by way of the benefit of the group. They see every white person in their circles, whether it's work or school, that the exact opposite happens. They're willing to throw their entire people, even their own family members, onto the bus for individual well-being and success. They see this kind of thing all the time, all around them. That's lived experience. Where does these excuses that Charlie is talking about, these explanations, these defenses for beliefs and actions about the white race that are negative and against the white race that will harm them, where do they come from then? Where is all of this history? It's in your fiction. It's in your fictional movies. It's in your novels. It's in your TV shows. And the subconscious mind, as we teach in the Go Free method, cannot tell the difference. I cannot stress this enough to you all who are listening. You have two minds inside of you. You have your subconscious and your conscious mind. Your subconscious mind absorbs and learns without any effort whatsoever. The conscious mind takes effort, which human beings don't like to exert. The subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between reality and fiction. Have you ever walked through your house afraid of the dark hallway or bedrooms because of the horror movie you watched recently? Were you ever afraid of that valley out in the desert, not because of something that happened in an actual valley in the desert, but because you saw a movie where something horrible happened in a valley in the desert? That is your subconscious mind attempting to live for you. And the problem is that we live the majority of our lives, 95% or more of it, in our subconscious minds. The conscious mind can interrupt at any point. And that's what gives people the illusion that they are actually, with their conscious mind, living their lives. It is merely an illusion, my friends. Those people who Charlie was just pointing out, we're saying, with this white woman and her white privilege, or this white, and that's how all white people act. If you were to put them on a polygraph test, or even some of those more advanced types of lie detecting tests, where they monitor the parts of the brain where the electrical activity is taking place, and you were to ask them, is this happening? Does this happen in the world? They would tell you without a lie detected that indeed it's everywhere in the world, when in reality, they've only seen it everywhere in fiction.
Ashamedly, at one point in time, this is how
Caleb
I
is
used to
here.
think as
Great to see you, good brother.
well. And beyond the people in my circle, I noticed that many people of color have this sort of blase attitude, an attitude most particularly pronounced.
Okay, we need Charlie to not use the anti-white phrase people of color. Charlie, it excludes the white race from humanity. We should not be excluded from humanity. It is an immoral thing to do. And I know what you're saying. You could say non-white people. Non-white just is neutral. It just means people who are not white. So please, in the future. Could you imagine, Grace, the sinner is here. Great to see you. Could you imagine Charlie armed with the concepts from Go Free? Could you imagine how much good he would do? I mean, Charlie, you could end up getting on like Fox News even.
When there are no other white people around. Things are being said not just behind closed doors, but out in the open, not just between close friends, but between complete strangers. So
That's an interesting observation that he makes there. That these things he says, I don't know if you noted that, they're not just being said behind closed doors. In other words, he experiences them being said behind closed doors. Yes, this is indeed what's taking place. And there are a lot of white people out there that need to know it's not just non-white people, it's anti-white people, white and non-white. And behind closed doors, the kinds of things that they say are some of the most horrific you won't even find in horror movies. So he's just telling you right there, it's not just behind the closed doors anymore. He's now old enough that he's seeing it happen out in the world around him. Wonderful. I'm saluting this guy so far. It's fantastic.
here's the thing. This is something that I've experienced countless times, so I know that there are other people who are experiencing it too. The idea that when you have a power disparity, the less powerful sort of has this general society given leeway to complain about the more powerful. The villagers complaining about their king doesn't have the same ring as the king making snide and crude comments about the villagers. But that's not what's going on here. Because although certain segments of our society refuse to believe this, even as evidence mount before our very eyes, in one side of the political aisle, people of color actually have greater power than white people.
Well,
That is
yeah.
the truth that is not being acknowledged.
Non-white people, please stop with the people of color. Non-white people, and I can see the great reptile, the great genius reptile is with us. Wonderful to see you, brother. So's Benny is here as well. Cascadia, great to see you. Remember, if you have a Prometheus is here. If you have a question for me, tag me as No White Guilt, and I will get to all of your financial gifts. I'll probably do the financial gifts if there are any in a few more minutes of this. But point in fact to what Charlie is saying right there, non-white people have all of the legal power in the West, all of it, in my opinion, of course, ask CNN, all of it. We have whole lifetimes of experience of witnessing that. And even more so, all of the social power, all of it, all of it. They are in total control because of anti-whiteism, in my opinion. Think for a minute, if a group of people, just an average group of people in society, enter a room and there are two people arguing, one is non-white and one is white, and the white person says, he or she called me, and then whatever the anti-white slur is. And then the non-white person says, he or she called me, and then the non-white slur. What is the group of people? Who are they going to side with, I should say? You know very well. In fact, they allow in American courts and courts elsewhere across the West, they will allow judges will look inform the law with anti-white morality. They will allow non-white people to physically beat white people who said words that the non-white people don't like. Now, this is my opinion. Go look it up and see if it's ever happened. But I think I've seen it a time or two or more than that. Check it out for yourself. They'll say, well, it's understandable that he beat you and cracked your skull open because, after all, you called him the N-word. I mean, how many times have we seen this? So who has the power in the West? It's not white people. And of course, I want to point this out for those who might be missing it. If the problem is that white people are the only ones who can be racist and discriminate and all of these other kind of things because they have power, then what's the remedy? The remedy then is that white people can't have power. Any white people can't have power. That's the only remedy. This is why you do not engage with anti-whites inside the anti-white narrative.
By the people that need to hear it, because this gets in the way of them wielding that power in the way they want, malignantly. I've heard from somewhere that politics is downstream of culture, and I think that is certainly correct. We have a mainstream culture that tells us it's okay to hold prejudice and hateful view of white people, and our
Mhm.
politics is then infused with this energy, and we see active,
Yes.
overt, and
What he's calling an energy is the morality. It's the anti-white morality. They have a moral imperative. That's why in the Go Free lexicon, we infuse our own moral imperative. When you see in contest with anti-whites is victorious again and again and again.
the book's racial discrimination of white people that those who are perpetuating this hatred is refusing to see as discrimination. They'll say, no, 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 this is remediation. These are the same people who are making tenuous arguments that some of our race neutral
This is what I was saying earlier. Every destruction in Western civilization of what is the West is defended as retributive justice. We're just getting back at white people. So for all the good non-white people out there, it's your freedom of speech too. It's your freedom of association. It's on and on. All of the rules, all of the norms of society, the functioning of the electricity and water, and as we see getting shut down in our once great country of South Africa, all of that you depend on and love is originally created and maintained and needed and utilized by white people. And so all of it has to be destroyed and remade and everything taken away from white people in order to have this anti-white justice, retributive justice. That's why you have to help us defeat anti-whiteism, or you're losing everything. You'll lose your privacy. All of that's going to go away. Everything you love.
laws discriminate against people of color. And this is certainly evidence that in one side of the political aisle, people of color have more power than white people. Because if we didn't have the power, we wouldn't be able to put into place practices and policies that does this. That's what power is. Things
Yes.
like Minneapolis local government agreeing to a contract with the teachers union that says white teachers must be fired first. New York City's government enacting a policy of having white seniors go to the back of the line on life-saving COVID treatment. A college professor that
Yes.
says white people should be killed and facing no repercussions. Cornell University banning white people from rock climbing lessons. One of many, many, many instances of liberal colleges doing the utmost to exclude and ostracize white students. BIPOC
Yeah. It is infinite. And I feel kind of bad because when you're like, let me go find some evidence of what we see everywhere, and you instantly step up to Olympus Mons level of data. It's very intimidating. And you feel like if I just grab this one and this one and this, like you're not doing any justice. But it's everything in the West from a club that is just going to be just for non-white people not allowed. You know, when they say just for non-whites, that means white people not welcome. You can't do that obviously in the reverse. You all the way up to policies at corporations, national and international, and as we said, state and federal government, policies that favor everywhere you look, favor non-white groups, not for the purpose of favoring them, for the purpose of harming Western kind every single time.
only events equal no whites, but they don't have the guts to say that, even though
Mm.
that is only visible from rock climbing lessons. One of many, many, many instances of liberal colleges doing the utmost to exclude and ostracize white
Not just liberal, which is anti-white, all universities.
students. BIPOC only events equal no whites, but they don't have the guts to say that, even though that is what that is. That's what makes it different than the
That's a great way to say it. Arden White is here. Great to see you, sister. Northern Dawn is here. Wonderful to see you.
grumblings of the common villager. The villagers have surrounded the palace, demanding Marie Antoinette's head. The power dynamics have shifted. That is a fact. Progressive media outlets do not cover these stories. Some people out there have no idea that this is going on. But worse, some others out there know but agree with what's going on. And for those people to
Yep.
convince themselves that this is not racial discrimination, they play mind tricks and word games. They use phrases and talking points like punching up. You can't be racist to white people. You can't oppress the oppressor, meaning acting oppressively, but I've designated you as the oppressor, so everything goes. Or if
Yeah. And that's back to the anthropomorphizing of the race. So in other words, if you have a child being victimized by an adult, that adult is the oppressor, and the child can't do anything to the adult because of the size difference, education difference, life experience difference, etc. That, of course, is not what's taking place. Do not get dragged into those conversations with anti-whites. It is These are their concepts that we refer to as meme pathogens, and we teach you to refield the conversation because they are in a fantasy. And if you allow somebody to take you into a fantasy and you try to bring documents from the real world about data, it means you are a dumb SOB. And that's what our race has been for a long time. And because you can't listen to white guys with high foreheads anymore. You can't you can't identify a real leader anymore. I mean, for God's sakes, these white nationalist groups, they've outsourced to other races, Jewish people and the rest, their leadership.
Abrams Candy's infamous words, the only way to remedy past discrimination is current discrimination. Or when people say things like, what we're doing to white people is not racism because racism is prejudice plus power and we don't have the power. They use all this mind bending apparatus to delude themselves into believing what they're doing faces no moral quandary. But in the back of their minds, perhaps in their subconscious minds, is racial revenge. We
Yes.
experienced it,
Yes.
you experienced it too.
And here's the thing. Does that make sense? This is why it's fantasy. Does it make sense? Like he just said, they're saying to themselves, we experienced it. How do you experience the joys or pains of another person that isn't even alive? How do you experience that? So, how are they experiencing? Take your average, say, non white person who claims that their ancestors were slaves, for example, in the United States, and they're saying they experienced it. How? That is fantasy. And you have experienced some sort of benefit from being the owner, and you have no tangible connection whatsoever. It is pure fantasy. All of these things designed as excuses to do what? To get at the victimization of Western kind. This is why we go straight to their objective. And we say, I don't care how many excuses you have for it, I reject anti white conclusions. We're going to be actually equitable or nothing at all. And you're going to out yourself as the anti white POS that you are. Everything he just ran through that they said, oh, they play these mind games and everything. All of those things were what? Constituent parts of the excuse of retributive justice.
See how you like it. That people of color are using our newfound power to act this way and then pretend like none of this is going on leads me to believe that we would have done the same thing that white people did
Mm,
were we to be in their historical position. Because such acts,
wow. That's a great point he's making, that what he witnesses now that non-white groups are doing to white people is the evidence that disproves the anti-white narrative that if non-white people had been dominant in well, and they, of course, they were dominant in their countries, but if they had dominated the white race, they would not have treated the white race differently. They would not have said, "Okay, white race, we're going to teach you now how to coddle and take care of lightning bugs and ladybugs and butterflies." That is fiction. He's saying right there, the way that you're behaving now is evidence that you would have been every bit as ruthless as you claim that white people were. And again, it's white people back then. It's not that it infuriates me beyond the ends of time that white infants are held. This is why I put this on the front of Born Guilty. White infants are born with this white guilt laying on them, with this responsibility, with this debt laid on them by these vicious anti-white pieces of human waste that he was showing videos of. As you can see, it's just an excuse to get to our victimization, to get to the victimization of that baby right there. It's just an excuse. Do not stay in their story.
have its roots in human nature, not white people nature. And one can only imagine what might happen in the coming decades when the demographics of the US will have shifted such that white people will no longer constitute the majority, when the younger generation you've just seen have graduated from elite schools and hold positions of power in our
Yes.
institutions, our government, corporations, entertainment, news media, and so forth, how they might, in wielding the levers of society, be able to rationalize using their adult brain the hatred that
Yes.
was embedded in their minds during their adolescence. What we're seeing
Yep.
is just the beginning.
Grace, you're welcome. Thank you for thanking me for reviewing this. You're not going to get a better review anywhere else. I mean, face it. If you're one of these people that want to show up and you're like, I don't know, there's a white guy with a tall forehead, not interested, then you can yourself off. You're going to go hang out in the dunce room. You're not going to find a better insight than you're going to get from yours truly. And I'll debate anybody on it.
To the white people who are watching, I just want to say you are not an oppressor for refusing to accept an ideology that teaches people to hate you, that teaches you that you are inherently bad,
Yep.
that your children are inherently bad, that you are inherently racist no matter what you do or how you think, that you need to repent by taking affirmative steps in your life to redress harms that your ancestors may have done, or the racist actions of other white people. In fact, you are not an oppressor, period. You did not choose to be
That's right.
born white, just like any of us did not choose to be born in our race. And to ask of you, at the individual level, for example, to give your life in service of people of color, to be used as physical barriers at protests, to give away your house to black people instead of your children, all actual things that have been publicly demanded of white people.
And white people are doing. Some of those white people you saw, they're giving, we see this routinely in the white race. You don't see this in any non-white race, as far as I'm aware, where people will, a family will accrue wealth over the course of their lives, whatever that is. It could be low, middle class, whatever it is. And then they take it all and they give it to non-white people rather than their descendants, because that's how brainwashed they are. They're taking, and it's, by the way, it's not theirs to just give away to other groups of people, because they didn't start off in their lives with nothing. It was their parents and grandparents and ancestors of generations of white people that have built brick upon brick upon brick, that they then take all of that and give it the middle finger and give it away. It's the only race that does that, because they have succumbed to anti-whiteism, and there hasn't been a way out until the go free method.
To ask this of you is morally reprehensible collective punishment. You are not under any obligation to carry yourself in any sort of way that others demand of you just because of the color of your skin. This, you need to do this and you need to do that because you benefit from privilege thing is bogus.
Mm-hmm.
It is just a way for people harboring racial animus to attack you, to
Yes.
say that the accomplishments you've achieved in your life isn't yours,
Yes.
and to silence you. It is not you. It is this ideology that is wrong and perverse. It is one cloaked in a shroud of pseudo justice and self righteousness, all the while excreting toxic fumes of racial hatred.
Yes.
It blames all white people for the actions of their.
And let me point out, why do they bother in the anti-white narrative, the psychological warfare? Why do they bother to give the individual man or woman anti-white on the street a moral argument? Because human beings need that to act. They're going to be, especially in my experience, white people. There are going to be some, we usually put those in prison or execute them, that need no moral framework whatsoever. It's in part for the actor, in this case, the anti-white, uh, the victimizer, but in larger part for the victim. The excuse to victimize white people has to be agreed with by the white victim, so that they will allow themselves to be victimized. You're not going to get that take anywhere else. Nobody else will give you deep insight like that. That is how this ends up happening. That is why I created the Go Free method, because you are not going to be able to stay in their story. We have many generations to prove it, and argue with them inside of their narrative against their white guilting and succeed. You have to get out of that story. It's a very easy thing to do with the concepts that we provide you. You learn more jargon at work.
Their ancestors, something you have no control over, while absolving Black people of personal responsibility for their own individual actions by holding that Black people commit acts of harm, for example, towards another community. That's a fault of white supremacy.
Big hello to Western Kind Artist here. Great to see you. And Danielle is here. Hello to you. Well, it's not just Black people, but my guess is he's talking about Black people that have freedom from responsibility and inside the anti-white narrative because of the victimization of Asian people where they intersect in some communities with some Black people, not all Black people, of course. So my guess that's why his focus is there. But every non-white group and every victim group or privilege group that can contain white people there as well, they all have freedom from responsibility inside the anti-white narrative when victimizing white people. And that could take the form of the physical person of a white person or their economy as far as job or healthcare, anything like that, but also our projections, Western civilization, our laws, our literature, our mathematics. We see it all under attack by anti-whiteism.
White people are controlling them like puppets on a string. It's a backwards, transgressive ideology. If you don't harbor any hate in your heart but want to fight it as a matter of principle, this does not make you racist or bigoted. If you refuse to accept their premise in your head, but are too afraid to voice your opinion, you're neither a coward nor a bad person. If you're of a liberal bent, but there's a small corner in your brain telling you as you're watching this video that perhaps some of this is wrong, listen to your intuition.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you think, oh, I agree with most of what the progressive left teaches about racial justice, but just not with some of this disagreeable stuff, only at the extremes. I'm here to tell you that the rot starts at the core. This racial
Amen.
hatred of white people is
Amen. It is rotten from the core throughout the system. Anti-whiteism, there's nothing that is legitimate about it. Not a scintilla is legitimate about it. It is all designed to justify, legitimize the victimization of Western kind and the destruction of our projections.
a natural outgrowth, part and parcel of an ideology that attempts to indoctrinate us into believing that there is current systemic oppression going on, that all racial disparities we see today is the sole result of oppression by white people, when there are other more plausible explanations to be had that these same people are silencing as impermissible hate speech. They're telling you, shut up, you'll take it, and you'll like it.
Yeah, that's exactly what they say.
But contrary to what they're saying, you don't have to take that. You can believe that the things that have been done in the past were morally wrong, as well you should, all the while believing that what is currently going on is also wrong, that we're going backwards, that this is history rhyming with itself. The table is turning in an eye for an eye manner. As the great Mahatma Gandhi once said, an
Well,
eye
that's where the reality would be rhyming with the fiction of anti-whiteism. The reverse, the reverse of the fiction is this domination. That's what he's talking about there, rather than the reality of the present being a reverse and rhyming with a reality of the past. So that's an important distinction to make.
for an eye.
Let's have this guy on, man. If he'll come on, he's going to be a superstar. God bless him too. Really, send this guy your good vibes. Send this guy your good energy. He's going to have a lot of sort of these white, like wimpy white people that are not able to find validation in themselves because they're white, or from a handsome white genius like myself. They'll only be able to find validation in non-white people saying, it's okay, whitey, it's okay. You don't have to think that way. And they'll give him like these tepid applause. But there are going to be some sickers that come after, slandering this guy. Who knows what they're going to say about? Look at all the things he said about me. They're going to be slandering this guy. Big people are going to be out there trying to lead him down these dead-end alleys to make him look awful. So pray for this guy. Send him your good vibes, whatever it might be that you do, because it's coming.
I will leave the whole world blind. But those driven by hatred would sooner gouge everyone's eyes out than realize that true victory for people of color
Oh, yeah.
and that we're going backwards, that this is history rhyming with itself. The table is turning in an eye for an eye manner. As the great Mahatma Gandhi once said, an eye for an eye will leave the whole world blind. But those driven by hatred would sooner gouge everyone's eyes out than realize that true victory for people of color would have been having history record that when the power dynamics shifted, we treated white people with the kindness that their forefathers may not have shown our forefathers. But now, it will say.
So he's speaking to, I think, in a way, kind of alleviate, I think, specifically non-white people who are anti-white, saying that, come on, guys, we can be better than what we've learned about white people. And that, again, is still, looking at the anti-white narrative as historical truth or accurate or what have you. And that therefore and also there's this like blood libel, or also blood wealth, if you will. So they've done, if we can do good, we were so good in the past before they showed up, and we could be that good again, and we will then be the inheritors of that good, that sort of thing. So right out of the anti-white narrative, just wanted to point that out.
Say when we gained the power, we turned around and started doing some of the same stuff to white people. Segregation, social ostracization, hatred sanctioned by government and law. And we're doing all of this while pretending like we're doing something valiant. We've missed our bus.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean that there can't be a course correction. So, to some people of color watching who are engaging in this sort of hatred, whether or not you're acutely aware, the same people that act like white people as a collective are not people, but rather some pernicious alien force that has come to invade the earth. With this video, I implore you to ask yourself, what are we doing to white people?
Yeah.
As some people love to say, do better. Happy New Year, everyone. I hope that this new year brings you love, joy, and light. 2022 was a really difficult year for me, but the difficult times were interspersed with times of happiness. Some of the happiest moments of my life, actually. So I'm grateful for 2022 and excited for 2023. I hope you're as well. Please do not give up your resolutions in January. Stick it out till March, like I do.
All right. So what are your views on this video? What did you think of Charlie? Great guy, huh?